This is Art Talk with April, an artist podcast where we meet artists from all around the southeastern states. Thanks for joining us. Let's get started. Hi everyone, welcome to Art Talk with April. Today we have Rebecca Fulmer. She is an interdisciplinary artist here in Birmingham, Alabama. Thank you for coming on the show, Rebecca. This is so cool.
Hey, April. I'm very excited to talk to you.
Yeah, I am too. Where are you right now? Is this your studio space?
Yes, so this is my studio space, and I in the building that Ground Floor Contemporary is in. I don't, have you been to Ground Floor? You know, the gallery is on the downstairs on the ground floor,
Yeah.
and Sarah is in the middle. And
Okay.
Sarah Armstrong, lives here. This is her building, and there's one, two, three, four artist studios downstairs,
Yeah.
and then there's five upstairs, and I'm one of the five on the third floor.
Wow.
So
Oh
I've got a
gosh.
really great space, and
Yeah.
it's very nice size, and I'm able to have a loom. I could show you, but
Goodness.
over here I've got my loom and my
Yeah.
sewing area, and then I've got work table, and that's
Amazing.
a wall loom that I built over there. This project that I'm very irritated with this material, so I'm like, okay, now, and I'll do it for a little bit, and then I kind of get mad at it and come back. So it's like taking me. I mean, I got out of graduate school in 2024, and I started it before then, I think. So 2022, I think I started that, and I'm still not finished with it. It's 2026. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I've got to get on it. But I have some other pieces I did with that. But then work table, and then that round thing right there is a new soft sculpture that I've been working on. I've been doing this online workshop, and so that's from that. And then the two pieces, the wall hangings next to it, are both weavings that I did on a heddle loom, but they're with a reflective, that material like on firefighters' uniforms or on your tennis shoes that, they catch light, reflective. And that's a tiny, like 2 millimeter reflective. They call it yarn. It's really more like a tape. But I did a couple weavings with that fishing line, and it's such an interesting material because I was trying to set it up so that it would happen. But when you look at it, if the light source is behind you and you look at it, it illuminates, and it's just so cool. And without being electrified, I just can't figure out how to show it and have the light source be behind people who are looking at it at all times. So no matter where you're standing, as long as the light source is behind you, it will illuminate. Which, there's something interesting in that. I just haven't quite figured out how to do it and, have it make sense.
That is so interesting to me. That is so beyond what I am familiar with and how I work. And so the complication of trying to figure out the lighting to make it do what you're wanting to do is like a whole other, I don't know, third dimension element or fourth dimension that I can't even wrap my brain around.
I do I had a show at Gadsden Museum of Art back in, it was 5 months after I was asked to do it 5 months after I got out of school. And then I had it, let's see, I graduated in January. So in October, November, the show was up, and it was a big space and a lot of work, and my hair fell out.
I bet.
But it was wonderful. I actually loved every minute of it, and I was so glad. But the show was titled Light in Tandem, and I just think every work I make, I'm trying to figure out how to incorporate light in the work, either through shadow or through, having it projected through a material that's translucent or transparent. So it's just kind of always with me.
Yeah.
It started a few years ago. Am I okay getting into this now?
I was just about to ask, how did this start?
Well, let me just go back even further. So my mother was an artist, a pretty well-known artist in Alabama, Tully, and she was a painter originally and ventured into fiber art. She she learned how to sew at a young age and was always just making all our clothes when we were kids. And she started painting, and when she was about in her 40s, those two started merging together, and she was dyeing on silk and doing shibori and got involved with the Surface Design Association. That's where she took, back then they had a yearly meeting and they'd have all these workshops. I wish they still did that.
Yeah.
But she studied under Yoshiko Wada, who was and still is the premier shibori person in this country, and is connected artist in this country with other artists all over the world about natural dyeing and shibori and indigo. Anyway, so my mother kind of beat it over my head, about I was the youngest and pretty wild child, lots of energy, and she was always trying to figure out ways to wear me out, which is funny that I was like that with my kids. But anyway, so she taught me how to sew, and always like breaking the rules. Like, she'd say, do it this way. And I'd be like, what if this happened? What if we did it this way? But I was very close to her. And I was in my 20s. I graduated from Auburn School of Interior Design. It was out of the School of Architecture. And I was also, before that, I was an art history major and an art minor. My mom was like, don't major in art. You need a moneymaker. You need a way to support yourself, which she was right. But I think I would have had a straighter path if I had majored in art. But 8 years after I started college, I ended with almost a degree in art history, a minor in art, and a major in interior design. But when I got out of school, I still just always wanted to be making art, and I loved design. Design was amazing. I was in my 20s. I've never been totally comfortable with straight out painting, and maybe I'm being rebellious because that's what my mom did. I'm not sure, but I learned a lot of interesting collage techniques and printing techniques in design school. And so I came out wanting to fuse those and make work out of those, all in when, you're presenting your boards, for these projects. And I'm sure, being a graphic designer, you have all these, we used to do acetone rubbings, and I loved layering those, and I would go get off on that, instead of finishing my project. But I know but anyway, so I did that and really kind of continued to make work that way through getting married, having children. I have 4 boys.
Oh, wow.
And they were rambunctious boys. They were full on and quite a lot of time. And at one point, they got into my studio. I had a little studio in my house, and they got into it and spread the art supplies all over my yard. And I was like, okay, we need to kind of bench this for a while. But at the same time that this was happening, the kids were young. In 2008, the iPhone comes around, and I had this tool in my hand, and immediately started taking pictures and wanting to break the rules and mess with them.
Yeah.
And around that time as well, my mother was diagnosed in 2007 with ovarian cancer. She was 67, and she lived about 3.5 years.
Oh my goodness.
And it's crazy. I mean, she was my third wheel. I mean, not my third wheel, third leg. I mean, sorry, Mom. Third leg on the table, of support. I felt like there was my husband and my mom, and I felt like, it had been kicked out from under me, and I was so lost. But it's so strange. The day that she passed away, this is 2010, so 2 years later, after I started messing with this, I walked out of the room, really the morning she passed away, and there was this light being projected through the window. It was early in the morning. There was dew on the window, and it was just so beautiful. It was just this speckled light, and I just kind of was like, hey, Mom, took the picture, and, she's lying. She's passed and lying in the room, 4 feet away from me.
Yeah.
And, I think my siblings think I'm so strange, but it's abstracted that piece, that image, started working in Apple Photos when you could edit in that, and I just thought it was so cool. I felt like I was painting, but I was also felt like I was sitting on my hands and felt awkward, but I was still drawn to it. And I kept working that way, and I used that image. I still pull it up every once in a while and print it on something, but I printed it on watercolor paper and painted over it, and I used it in transparency film, and
Yeah.
I was making these boxes that were lined with mirror, and I would have a transparency film in front of it, and then a sheet of a non-glare acrylic on top of that.
Yeah.
And what would happen is, as the light changed throughout the day, the piece would change because the mirror would reflect that light.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
And I started looking at it, and I was like, this happened when Mom passed. This
Yeah.
obsession with strange light, is what I call it, really happened. And it's almost like I got very curious about, where do they go? You
Yeah.
know, they're here, but they're gone. Not in a spiritual way, but in a kind of technical way. Like, this is crazy. Like, they're here and then they're gone, and where they go. And
Yeah.
and then you got this feeling like they're still with you, and you look for
Yeah.
signs. And I just thought that whole idea was interesting and, kind of almost animalistic. Like, it's just so hard to understand, but it's so natural to us,
Yeah, absolutely.
that morning and everything. And the whole process was amazing. And I was so grateful that I got to be a part of her passing. I felt so lucky to be a part of that. But anyway, I feel like I'm sounding
No.
morose. It just goes into all of it. And
Yeah, absolutely.
I started doing these boxes and made those for years. They were very physically hard to make, but lining them with mirror, and sometimes I would put a transparency film on the mirror
Yeah.
and adhere it to the mirror, and then so there would be like a inch and a half difference between the back wall of the box and the front, which was
Yeah.
the non-glare acrylic. And so sometimes I would have a transparency film on the back wall and a transparency film on the front wall, so that when you looked through it, the images worked together.
Yeah.
And it was I really loved working that way. And it was so interesting, but it was expensive and time consuming and physically draining. And so when my mother was diagnosed, I was actually applying to go to graduate school at 42, and that got benched. And so 15 years later, I've been making this work and cutting off, I was making this transparent, print the transparency film, and I would measure the size of the acrylic and, or the mirror,
Yeah.
and cut it down. And the clippings were so pretty because they were very vibrant.
Yeah.
And I think I explained this, but these are all photographs that I'm manipulating.
Sure.
So I was saving these clippings, and 15 years later, decided to go to graduate school at
Yeah.
58 years old.
Oh my
Well, I guess I
goodness.
applied at 57. And actually, no, I was younger than that. Anyway, what was it, 2024? And I'm 60 now. So anyway, so the first semester, it was a 2-year program, and it was the low residency program. So when I was applying 15 years prior, there was like
Mhm.
one or two in the country that were doing this.
Wow.
And when I go to apply 15 years later, there's like 30. It was
Oh my
amazing. I mean, it was
gosh.
a
Wow.
model that's really working for people.
Yeah.
And they have different types of residencies. Some are 8 weeks, which I couldn't do. Some are 3 weeks. That was a little much. But Lesley University, where I went, was 2 weeks at the beginning of each semester. And then
Wow.
you work in your own studio, and you are assigned an academic advisor, and then you have to go find an artist mentor or somebody out in the field,
Sure.
and you meet with them once a month on Zoom. And it was great. It just worked perfectly for
Yeah.
me. But so we did the first residency, and that's where I met Heather.
Yeah.
And actually, Heather's mentor was Sarah Armstrong, so that's really where I met Heather. But immediately we became friends. But after the first residency, I go home to my studio, and I'm
Mhm.
like, oh my God, what do I do now? Like, I don't know what to do. I was just so stunned and stalled and overwhelmed. And so I started taking these clippings. I had hundreds of them.
Yeah.
And I thought, and it's such a good exercise that we all kind of forget, if
Mm.
you're stopped, just do something rote,
Yeah.
do the same thing over and over again. And I just picked these up. I pulled the boxes that I had them all in,
Mm.
and I just started sewing them together, and ended up with, I was like, I'm going to sew all these together, just going to get rid of them all. And I ended up with 792 feet of
Wow.
one straight piece of film. And the first time I showed it, I was not ready to show it, but I was encouraged to. And it wasn't great. It was okay. But I called it 792 feet because I didn't know what to call it. But it was really represented. I mean, I'm so glad I did that because it represented from the time I started to apply to graduate school
Mm.
to and my mother got sick to the time that I actually went to graduate school.
Yeah.
And it was really just, it was interesting. It was this film strip, but it represented those 15 years. They
Yeah.
were all images from those 15 years
Goodness.
and, little clips. And so then I showed it and wasn't quite happy, with the way I installed it. And so I immediately cut it up and started trying to figure out some other ways. And it ended up, I don't know if you saw online, there's a piece called Distant Hours.
Yeah.
It's pink panel with some nylon mesh tubing weaving in
Yes.
and out. And
Mhm.
so that was one piece I created out of it.
Oh,
And there were some pieces before I sewed that I collaged in on one big piece of canvas. So there were two pieces like that.
yeah.
But then it kind of spawned another piece called Cicada that was part of some of my thesis work. And it was this piece that it looked like a cicada shell.
That's
And
neat.
yeah, and I just I dedicated that, that name to the night the images were taken. Was we have a house on Mobile Bay, and
Yeah.
that is my heart and soul. And I think if light is in every piece of my work, the bay is in every piece of my work.
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful body of water, and I'm just absolutely in love with it. And we have
That's
history down
awesome.
there. My husband's from there. But
Yeah.
anyway, the night that after Hurricane Sally, my son and I went back to check on the house. And, of course, all the power's out. And we had a massive tree that came down our yard and it took down all the Spanish moss with it. So I was like, oh, my son is Banks. I said, oh, get behind and show your light, through the Spanish moss. And I started taking all these images, capturing these pictures. And then, of course, get home, put them into Photoshop, start messing with them. And that work came out of it. But the reason I called it Cicada is because, you don't realize how much sound electricity makes.
Yeah.
And there's a hum, and you only know that when there's no electricity. When it's
Yeah.
completely off, it's so quiet. And this
Yeah.
going nuts that night. They were so loud, and I think they were happy that they could be heard. And stars were crazy, and the moon was strong, and it's just this. It was the calm after the storm. The storm
Yeah.
had passed through hours before. So anyway, so
That's so
yeah,
interesting. Oh my goodness. And when you're talking about all of these things, it's like it seems like there's a lot of synchronicities and things just lead to the next thing, like one experience leads to the next piece
yeah.
and then the next piece. And you're kind of, I guess, do you typically take one and then transform it into another? Or does that only happen with certain things like the 792 feet thing?
Yeah, I wish I was that intentional.
It seems like it though. Like when you're talking
It does
about it, it
happen.
sounds like it is.
Well, we learn
If
from,
not physically,
yeah,
mentally, definitely.
I don't mind redoing pieces that I've already shown.
Yeah.
I think that designer in me, I'm always like,
Mm.
oh, I could have done it better. I need to do this.
Yeah.
But I don't always work that way, but I guess sort of kind of do because materially, yes, I recycle pieces if I'm not happy
Yeah.
with them. But I also learn from the materials that I've worked with previously, which causes me to lean into some other material like, fishing line or,
Yeah. I was
something like that.
wondering that because, like, when I'm looking at your work, I see so many different materials. Like, how are you making those decisions or coming about what material you're going to use? Like, how does that even come into
It,
being? Like the tubing, like, where did that come
yeah.
from? And
Well, I think it's all in the pursuit of light, in a
yeah.
way, or, in treating material as a lens, light to
Oh,
pass through and come out something else. But the nylon mesh tubing, I was wanting to weave with something that light could pass through, but I wanted it I wanted to create that. I mean, that's the nylon mesh tubing behind us.
yeah.
I wanted to create something that didn't exist unless there was a shadow. And which of course it
Oh,
does exist. I mean, you can still see it, but it's like a ghost. And
yeah.
I have two other of these that the first one I made, it was crazy. It was on a frame, just a frame loom that I made, not like that, but it's kind of the first one I made. It was kind of
Yeah.
rinky dink. And I just wrapped the mesh tubing around the frame. And
Yeah.
so it was two layers, instead of being all the warp thread, all the warp
Yeah.
lines being by side, they were kind of,
I got
by
yeah.
side and, two layers, front and back. And so anyway, it was a crazy experimental thing. And when I took the frame apart and took it off the loom, it just collapsed on itself. Crazy. It was so cool. And it looked like a cocoon.
Yeah.
And I thought it was interesting, just thinking about cloaks and cocoons and, how you can disappear into them. And I was trying to make this
Yeah.
piece that was sort of invisible. And so I called it Ghost. One is called Ghost, one is called Cocoon. But the cool thing about that material is, and this is something that, you get from, I'm sure it's made in China, in mass, and you can get it in almost any color. And it's for, like a lot of stores will use it for their packaging, or, people use it to wrap presents. And what I loved about it is when the shadow that's created when the light passes through, there's an outline on either side of the shadow. So you see kind of, since it's mesh, it's a little grayed in the middle, and then it has this outline, and it creates this just beautiful shadow.
Yeah.
And so the design being, kind of lines crazy, everywhere, it just creates this crazy looking, work on its own,
Oh my
cast
goodness.
own work. And I thought with the boxes and with casting light and creating shadows, it's almost like I'm asking the work to finish it. So
Yeah.
I'm like putting things together, and then I'm saying, okay, you finish this, or asking the light to finish it. So anyway, it's fun. I had this, I'm so curious about materials, and I'm
Yeah, I could see
finding,
that.
and and not natural materials. I'm like always like
Yeah.
looking at industrial stuff. I love hardware stores, and
Yeah.
to the point that my local hardware store in our neighborhood, they asked me one time if I'd be interested in working there, because I was helping customers that were coming in, especially women
Yeah.
who look lost. I would like, are you looking for this? It's over here. But I think that's a lot of where it spawns from, and being an interior designer and working with architects.
Yeah.
But yeah,
That's
I don't
so
know.
fascinating.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about that and you're describing the way that particular material creates a shadow and the way you're talking about it, it reminds me so much of how a lot of painters will speak about shadow and light in that way, like
Yeah.
describing it and be very focused on that element of their painting. It's
Mhm.
not the vase of flowers or whatever the thing. It's the light and the shadow that they're obsessed with.
Yeah. Annie, do you know Annie O class?
No, I don't.
She is a fantastic painter, and I was listening to her talk today this morning, and it's K, and Annie A is Annie with an O.
Oh,
And
okay.
but she was talking about light and the difference of the way light looked where she grew up in Senegal as opposed to Seattle, as opposed to Birmingham. And I was just like, God, it's so funny that we really, like, I've always connected to her work in that
Mhm.
way, because I see the light in her work.
Yeah.
And, listening to her talk, I understand why, because we're both looking for the same thing. And I was telling her how interesting I thought that was, and that, we attach emotion to light, we attach feeling to light. And, I think that's why I got drawn to it, after my mom passed, because I felt something in there.
Yeah.
And it's a companion to me, almost. And so I don't know. And I've got thousands and thousands of photos of weird light. I've got photos
That
of,
is so
I've got a
fascinating.
file on dead birds, because I feel like I see dead birds so much. And so I'm always like taking a picture on the street.
Now
I
that's
did,
a completely different direction.
I know, it's crazy. I mean, I've got a bunch of my dog's eye. I did a whole
Oh, that's
piece of work
fun.
on my dog's eye and horse's eye. I have sky and clouds and sun and water, and just it's like about 30 different files in my iPhoto on the
Wow.
fireworks. I worked a lot with fireworks. As a matter of fact, I've been working with fireworks forever, and predominantly fireworks, actually. I did a lot of shadow
Mhm.
images in the boxes, but predominantly fireworks. And it was so interesting because immediately when I go into Photoshop and I start messing with these photos, first thing I do is invert it to see what comes up,
Mhm.
because that's where a lot more information that you don't see is there. And I just think that's so interesting. I mean, it's like an X-ray,
Yeah.
it shows you things that are not visible. And when with the fireworks, when you invert it, all the smoke, you don't realize how much smoke
Oh,
comes up. Well, the smoke
interesting.
starts to
Yeah.
look like paint and lines, and and so that was so fun working with that. And I
Yeah.
would just, it would be 4th of July or New Year's Eve, and the boys are like, Mom, do you got your camera? I just started, doing the bursts and taking as much as I could. But going into Gadsden, one of the works was called Anamorphic Self, and the anamorphic mirror that distorts as you move by
Yeah.
it. And I did 28 of these. They were box panels, which, I used the boxes. In the previous work, they were really the cradled artist panels that I
Yeah.
flipped around to get the depth.
Okay.
But these I used them the proper way. But I did these weavings with mirrored mylar, reflective mylar. And so it's like a
Oh.
mirror and very thin, slippery material. And I wove that with images of fireworks that I've taken and
Yeah.
altered in some way. And so everywhere where there was not information in the image, I wove that. And where there was information, I floated. So float is where you skip over warp threads. So you have this longer,
Sure.
span of weft.
Yeah.
And so it was this great kind of feeling looking at that. And as you walked by these 28 pieces together, you could see your reflection in it just kind of coming in and out of you, just kind of a ghostly
Wow.
reflection. So yeah, so they actually were still hanging around these fireworks, stuff I'm doing. And
That's
yeah, I go
neat.
back and do images a lot, pull out.
Yeah. So when you're like creating these pieces and putting them together, I imagine you kind of have an idea of a piece in mind, or are you just experimenting and using your hands and exploring the material, and then a piece comes into being? Like, what are you
Yeah.
planning? Are you, I
Yes.
guess it's maybe some of both. It's like planning and
It's funny.
seeing how it works together.
I have a lot of work in my sketchbook
Yeah.
that I'm planning to do. And
Yeah.
if I would
Don't we
just,
all?
oh my God, if I would, and I'm going to do this. This
Yeah.
year, there are about 10 pieces in my sketchbook that interesting. And, one of them involves ping pong balls. And,
Oh,
I mean, it's just like, but I think sometimes, see something that I'm very visual.
yeah.
I don't forget. I cannot remember your name, but I know your face.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of, I think I'm just so much is running in my head all the time that there's details I miss, but I always know people's faces, which I say I have chronic deja vu because I always feel like I've seen you before or been somewhere before. But so, I see something that hits an idea and I'm in my head, I'll be driving down the road and I'll see something that makes me think of a texture or something. And
Yeah.
then I will go 5 minutes down the road. I have no memory of it because, there's two consciousness
Lost
going
in,
on there.
yeah, you're like lost in your thinking.
Yeah.
Suddenly you're,
And so that happens a lot. A lot of times it's working in my brain and I will wake up in the middle of the night with just the greatest idea, fully formed. And I'm
I
like, I
love
can do
that.
this. And then the next morning I'm like, no, that's not gonna work. But that happens a lot. And it's funny how
Well,
your brain, I think, is still thinking and processing and working and creating, even when you're supposed to be resting.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I do get inspired by a lot of artists. I get so excited when I see, work that I'm responding to. I mean, sometimes I get weepy. It just
Yeah. Like,
overwhelms
who are
me.
some of your inspirations?
I can't say her name. Olga de Amaral.
Yeah.
She is a real zinger for me. She's a Colombian artist. She's still alive. And she is a weaver. She
Yeah.
has huge, beautiful panels that she wants to really take up space in the room.
Mm.
And she's kind of my goal. I want to
Yeah.
really get to that point where I'm creating these panels that, they're weavings, but there's something else,
Yeah.
And she did a weaving out of plastic, which I'm like, damn it, I wanted to do that, but I'm still gonna do it. I had this whole thing that I worked with saran wrap, but she also did gilding on her. She would weave and then she would lay a gold leaf on top of
Yeah.
it, and pretty heavily. And I went through right before school, actually, I did about 2 years of gilding and
Yeah.
really do want to get back to it. That it was kind of frowned upon in graduate school as
What?
expensive material, and so
Uh,
I had to kind of tone it down a little bit. But I know, but I was in pursuit of light, and the gold leaf, especially this moon gold leaf, it gives the most amazing, beautiful quality of light. I love it. First of all, the name is so tantalizing,
yeah.
but it just feels like you've
That's what I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna
captured the
write that
light
down.
of the moon. Oh yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful. But there's so many different types of gold leaf, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway, I studied under this man online starting in COVID and with Charles Douglas, and he's out of Seattle. He's a master gilder and just very dedicated to, spreading the word and teaching it as much as he can and teaching this craft and
Yeah.
skill. Fantastic teacher. And I really need to get back to taking a few classes from him because he was great. But I was gilding on board and I took, I'm getting off track, but I took some plywood that was damaged. I'd like ripped something off of it.
Yeah.
The layers came off and I was practicing gilding. I thought, oh, I'll just do this. And gilded, it's called traditional water gilding
Yeah.
is what I went for because you can get a mirror finish
Oh wow.
because there are layers of clay bole, that you paint on to build up somewhat a cushion
Yeah.
to lay the leaf down, and then you burnish it. And when you burnish it, it's just this beautiful reflective surface.
Wow.
And so I did it over this, messed up plywood, and it was
Yeah.
beautiful. I loved it. And so I want to really get back to it. It is, I think I like very tedious processes, and that would be, I don't know why I lean into that, but I really would love to honor Olga and do some gilding on some of my woven work as I get into that. But she's fantastic. There are these photographers that I discovered when I was in graduate school, and all of a sudden I came across them and I was like, where have you been? I thought I was so weird. Like, no one was doing this to these images. And I was like, no one's going to get this. And then I discovered Eileen Quidlin and Sarah Vanderbeek and Uta Bart, B-A-R. And oh my gosh, I was just like, these people are blowing my mind. And like Sarah printed on, what's that material? It's like a neoprene.
Yeah.
And which, now you can print on anything.
Yeah.
I mean, anything.
Yeah.
And so she made, sculpture out of her images. And she just really had, she was just, they're both, and Eileen, she takes images and then in the developing process, she just puts weird chemicals on it. And
Mhm.
they almost look like painting. They're like screwed up photographs, they didn't
Yeah.
develop correctly, but really she's manipulating
Intentional.
it.
Yeah.
Very experimental. And there's another one that can't get her name out right now, but she takes chemicals. She shows up in her studio. She puts on a hazmat, full body, covered head to toe, hands, and she takes developing chemicals and a sheet of photo paper,
Yeah.
with emulsion on it. And she sprays this stuff like half the time she's spraying it through a hose. I mean, it's
Yeah.
crazy. And she's spraying all these different chemicals on the sheet. She hangs the emulsified paper vertically
Yeah.
and she sprays this on. And sometimes she'll do it on the floor, but then she goes and develops it. And I mean, you can imagine what crazy
Yeah.
stuff that.
Yeah. That is so
So,
interesting.
yeah, it's just so cool what is happening in photography right now. Somebody, they're always swearing. It's the death of painting. And, they said that when photography was first introduced, that painting's over. And of course, it's not over.
Yeah.
It's just became something else. I think if we didn't have photographs, we wouldn't have abstraction because
Yeah.
it forced painters to go into another area.
Absolutely.
And, even in graduate school, they were talking about the death of painting. I'm like, but I mean, there's always painters around here. Like, what are you talking about? But the same way when the iPhone came out, people were like, well, photography's over. Everybody can do it. Well, that's the great thing about it. It's completely democratic. And I was talking to these students yesterday and I was saying, you can do this. This is in your hand. You can do this. And most everything I've captured has been with my iPhone.
Yeah.
And I kind of like it that way because I don't want to call myself a photographer. So I don't want to be proper about what I use. And because there is a difference between me and a true photographer. Photographers are just, they have an eye, that
Yeah.
is so particular to them as painters do. So out of respect for them. But anyway, so, I've discovered those artists. I think about them all the time, Eileen and Sarah. And then, gosh, I had my list over here. I was like, I knew I'd forget if you asked me, but where did I go? Oh, Veronica Jansen too. She's a light artist, and she actually really experiments and gets into all sorts of different materials and installations, and
Same.
crazy about her. Oh, and then Elise Perroy. Anyway, Peroi. She's a weaver in France, and she really, like, I think about her constantly right now with this work that I want to be doing this year with the loom. She leaves a lot of weft exposed, and I really love that. And just kind of weaves in different materials and very light and airy weavings that are framed almost in a way. They're usually on a structure, and I
Interesting.
cannot stop thinking about her work. Yeah, and then there's
That,
an artist, Catherine Cormer. Right? I'm saying that it's Cormer. If you need to reference these, I will
yeah,
put.
you sent it to me. Can you send
Yes,
it to me?
you might want to remind me which ones I told you. But she's in London. She teaches at the University of Westminster, fiber art.
Mhm.
And really the last work in the show I had in January at Ground Floor with two painters, Sarah West
Mhm.
and Misty Bennett. It's crazy. We kind of came to our first meeting. I was like, Jennifer put us together. And I'm like, I'm not sure why I'm here.
Yeah,
And I'm so different. But we started talking, and I was like, oh my gosh, we're like speaking the same language. We're
yeah,
into, the subconscious and dual subconscious and parallel universes. I mean, we were just had this great conversation. And so the work that I installed for that show was inspired by Catherine, whatever her name is. Her
I'm
these
recording.
panels
Yeah,
she printed on and hung to the same subject but different images in front of each other, silk organza and then the silk satin on the back panel. And so that's what I did with these images that I had printed on for the show in January.
yeah.
So
I
anyway,
saw that. Were you like you had posted like a time lapse video or video of you working on it? Were you doing that in the gallery?
I was, and so I just always got to make it as hard as possible on myself. Yeah, these painters come in and they're just like, yeah, they smile, yeah, this is works, yeah, and then they're gone, and I'm like, oh my God, I've got to think
It
now.
might adjust it on the wire a little
Yeah,
bit, but
yeah, just make it look like it might feel better. But it was crazy, I have to say. We met to figure out where our work was going to go. We've got three
yeah.
walls in that gallery, and Jennifer was there, and Jennifer is just so great about knowing where things should go. And I walked in. I was coming in from Fairhope
Yeah.
on two wheels. So I was a little bit late, and they kind of had things on the side, and they figured my piece would go on this wall. And excuse me, and it was so funny because Sarah was over here, and I was kind of my met at the corner. So Sarah and our walls were together, and then Misty
Yeah.
was on this other side. But Misty had one piece, to the left and one to the right, and the piece to the left and my piece to the right were just talking to each other. I mean, they were just like, just energy going back and forth, and they were literally sucking the energy out of the room. And we're like, that's not going to work. So then we took Misty off that wall, moved her over where Sarah was, moved Sarah over there, and then the conversation just died between the work. I mean, it was so weird. It literally just, they all disconnected and they weren't really
Wow.
talking to each other. So Jennifer moves everybody back, but she moves that one piece that was next to my one piece. I mean, there was a doorway between them, but
Yeah.
moves that one piece over and then brings this other bigger piece of hers next to that other piece. And suddenly everybody was singing in unison. It was the craziest thing, but it's a testament to curators for one thing. But it was so fascinating because, it does, these works do talk to each other and they communicate and they vibe off each other and they create a certain atmosphere when you walk into these galleries. And anyway, it was a fascinating.
Absolutely.
I've talked about that so much. Yeah.
Well, that's so here's a question. I'm going to take it completely off subject, but how are you staying creative through these like difficult times in the world? Like, how are you focusing on that or continuing to work when all these other things are happening? Like, what are your feelings around that? I've had a lot of seen a lot of artists talking about that.
Yeah. I think about that a lot, and there is a lot of suffering going on right now.
Mhm.
And I'm a real middle of the road person. I
Mm,
really like to hear everybody's point of view
sure.
before I figure out what my own is. And I've been bothered that people on both sides have not felt like they had a right to speak. That is
Mm,
so valuable in this country, and we do still have it because people can riot in the streets and not get annihilated in this country, and that's a good thing. I'm happy that people are able to get out and get angry. That is a
Mhm.
healthy country, in my opinion. I know that people are not happy right now, and we need to move on from this time period we're in.
Yeah, yeah, really.
But I feel like in my work, my goal is an exercise in seeing different perspectives. And I
Mm.
do some of that is really a theme that is intentional with me. I want somebody to stand on one side of the work and see one thing and go to the other side and see another. And I was actually talking to the students about this. Is
Mm.
called unseeing is what I call it. And I had this professor in when I was in art minor, and he was my sculpture professor
Yeah.
at Catholic University in DC when I first started out in the early 80s, a long time ago. And Mr. Rooney, and I've talked about him so much. And it's so funny when somebody says something to you, it just lives with you for the rest of your life. And
Mm.
he just told me, we were having a conversation, just the two of us, and he said, never forget to see. And
Mm.
it has stayed with me. And I always think about that. And what he was saying and what he elaborated on is, see it. We come to things with our own preconceived ideas of what something
Sure.
is. And when
Mhm.
we're looking at a photograph or we're looking at art, we're always trying to locate ourselves in there.
Yeah.
And which is okay. It's a natural response. Nothing wrong with that. But for so many things, and feel like we've kind of forgotten this as a society to it's so important for us to kind of forget our preconceived ideas about what someone is, what you're looking at, what you're seeing, unsee it, forget, observe it, take it in, but then forget all that and come at it at a different angle
Mhm.
and try to understand it that way. And I feel like if I'm creating these situations, not that I'm some person that's trying to teach everybody something, but I do feel like if there's an opportunity to learn how to see things from a different perspective, I really like providing that and providing that muscle,
Yeah.
for people. And I think contemporary art provides that. Well, art in general.
Yeah.
But that's how I deal with that because
Yeah.
I've always had this thing where I can't stand not knowing what other people are thinking. Kind of like I'm just like I want to get in their head and just know
Yeah.
it. And it's that other side,
Mhm.
it's that knowing. But I think I don't do you hear that doorbell? That's not mine. Anyway, I don't know. I just
I think
I
that's a
think
great point. I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense.
yeah,
And especially with your work and the way that you're, the way that, like you said, you could walk around it and see all different, it changes, from your perspective or where you're standing.
yeah,
That's
what you
very
think it is.
interesting. Yeah.
Not really what it was, and Professor Rooney I was just so, I wish I dedicated my talk to him, my thesis talk.
Oh, wow.
And he had just passed.
Oh,
And I didn't know, I mean, I hadn't looked him up in years, but
yeah.
I would love to let him know that he impacted me in that way. And he had just passed. So I hated that I couldn't tell him and I couldn't
Yeah.
really find out where his people were or anything. But, it is amazing. I mean, I just think about unseeing things and
Mhm.
so that I can see them more thoroughly. And I told these students yesterday, I know this is really strange and you're going to walk away wondering what the heck this woman is talking about. But I said, hear what you're seeing, feel what you're seeing, see
Mhm.
through it and see around it,
Yeah.
and you relearn it. So
Yeah.
knowing through unknowing, but that's how I deal with it. I mean, it's such a hard time, and
Yeah, I think a lot of artists right now are thinking, okay, what's the point? Why am I doing this? When I should be doing something else or,
mhm.
helping somebody or being, more actively involved in some way to help others or whatever. But in the same sense, as artists, we understand typically that importance of art in the world and how that can bring people together or help them to see things differently in some kind of
Right,
way. And it's
right.
not and some artists are very in your face, but in some ways we can do that more subtly in a way that's not so like puts people on defense,
You're right.
makes them
Yeah.
kind of think a little bit more instead of just responding, which is
Well,
what's going on. Everybody's like, oh,
I think you're exactly right. I mean, and there is a real place for people that are pushing it. And
sure.
that whole question of what is art, as soon as I start arguing what is art, I'm like,
No.
you can't argue it because anything, I
Yeah,
mean, a toilet
especially
can be
coming
art.
from your perspective
Yeah.
and the way that you work in your media. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it art is, there's a artist, I can't think of his name, but he said, the job of the artist is never avert their eyes, and which is another way of never forget to see.
Yeah.
But it's okay to push the envelope and to make people think. It is our job. It
Yeah.
is, art makes you think. And it makes you consider things that you would never consider otherwise. And, you are a captive audience when you go into a museum. They got you and they can get that message through. But for me, I don't feel like I have a right to express my suffering for some reason. One is that I do live a comfortable life, and it's okay. There are people that really need to get their message out, and I understand that. But I just feel like I need to be sneaky about it, and I need to remind it. I feel like I need to remind everybody that we're humans first.
Yeah,
That's who we
absolutely.
are first before any color or gender or religion, anything's assigned. We are humans first, and
Mhm.
we cannot forget that. And that puts us all on the same page. And art puts us all on the same page because we all get to look at it, with our own eyes. And, I don't know. That is kind of always, it's interesting you ask that question because it's always swirling in the back of my head, and I don't mean to, I'm not coming across as disingenuous or not respectful of people who really are dealing with things and who really are making their mission to show people,
Sure.
what is happening out there and to remind people,
Yeah.
not forget, we have to be kind. And sometimes showing people that we have to be kind means showing people how ugly things are. So,
True.
you know,
Absolutely.
I'm glad it's out there, and I appreciate, the people who are doing that.
Yeah. So you had mentioned something about like the sort of evolution of tools, like how painting was kind of going out and people were
Yeah.
upset, and then how, photography with the iPhone. How do you feel about generative AI?
All for it.
Is a tool to use? Like, do you ever consider like pulling something like that into your work in some way?
Nothing is off the table. I will say
Nothing.
that. I really consider myself, I am a fusion of ancient processes with technology. So
Yeah,
I love that weaving, the oldest piece of
absolutely.
weaving known to man is actually 30,000 years old. They thought
Wow.
it was 12 or 15, but it's really, they found a piece it's an impression on clay of a
Oh, wow.
weaving, and it was 30,000 years old.
Wow.
Knitting is, we don't think it's that old, but there are versions of it that are that old. Gilding is an ancient technique. There's
Yeah.
evidence of it in the pyramids, and even beyond that. But I'm also very tantalized by this new technology. And, I'm obsessed with history. I almost exclusively read books about history. I'm reading a book right now called The Silk Road it's about the Silk Road, the trading routes and
Yeah.
how it evolved and how it, changed humanity once that opened up, changed the course of history. But anyway, I read it together and he is way ahead of me. It's a very dense book, but I love history. I love history because I feel like the more I know about the past, the more I understand the present, and the more I know that it has been very bad in the past. People
Mm.
have suffered way more than we do now,
Yeah.
and we are still here. We have not blown ourselves up yet.
Yeah.
We've had so much opportunity, and I'm getting off track here, but I tell my kids about this all the time. I'm always reminded of this. When I was in high school, this teacher gave us this reading, and we read it. It was, a page or page and a half. And afterwards, they said, "What do you think this is about?" And every one of us said, "This is about nuclear war." It talked about then,
Mm.
not, this new thing is going to annihilate mankind. We
Yeah.
are done. She says this was a monk talking in the 14th, 14th century. I think it was 1400. So anyway, talking about the invention of the crossbow.
Oh, wow.
And you can imagine, I mean, back then, they were throwing, they had the bows, that were
Yeah.
pull the thing back. But this, you could, put 10 arrows in it and just, and kill 10 at one
Yeah.
time. And
New
that's what he
invention.
thought. That
Yeah.
was his perspective. And, I think we always are saying the chicken is falling,
Yeah.
right? And it's fallen a lot of times and we're still here. And I think with AI, I feel the same way. When an entire group is like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, yeah, this is terrible. I'm like, wait a minute, let's rethink that. Is it really that bad?
Yeah.
And I mean, of course, there are some things that are that bad, but I'm very curious about AI, and I found that a lot of artists are really into it and curious about it. And I mean, isn't that always the new technology that comes out? The artists are the
Yeah.
ones that get their hands on it and just abuse it and push it and try to
Yeah.
do with it. I mean, that was the light and space artist. We're all about new technology and turning it into art. And so I think it's a really cool thing. I've personally have experienced worked with it. I
Yeah.
think that it is amazing what it can do and what
Mm.
it can provide on a first stage basis. I've found that I mean, as I get deeper in my relationship with Claude, is my
Yeah.
personal friend, Anthropic, but there are things that it just can't do. Like I tried to get it to do a slideshow for me, knowing all my work by now and knowing how I write and everything. And I tried to
Yeah.
get it to lay out a slideshow with me so I could have a framework and then work off that. And it just couldn't do it. I had to
Mm.
do it myself. So I think it's a great tool as a first line of defense. But inevitably, you have to go in there. It will not be your voice
Yeah.
if you use it. And the same way with art, you know. But I mean, here I am working in Photoshop,
Mm.
and I'm tweaking something, and being intentional about what I'm doing. And really, it's kind of not much different, making art with AI because you're giving it prompts,
Mm.
and you're telling it what to do. I
Yeah.
think it's incredibly interesting. To me, it's amazing that all of mankind is put in this bucket
Yeah.
and we get to ask questions and it goes in that bucket and just that show it's after this virus takes over the I cannot get the name up. It's with the woman from Better Call Saul. Oh Lord, I cannot think of the name. I see it every day. I can't. Anyway, it's a movie about, a series, new series.
Is that a brand new series? Is it Omnibus? Is that what it is?
Pluribus.
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 Yeah.
Yeah. So pluribus, takes from plural.
Mm.
And have you watched it?
I did. Yeah.
So, I mean, it hit me. I was like, this is AI.
Yeah.
This is what they're trying to,
Say something about, yeah.
represent AI
Yeah.
and say something about AI. And so I really, it's interesting. I kind of see it that way. You're asking this question and it's listening to the entire world and go, and I just think that's really beautiful.
Yeah.
So of course we're going to do bad things. We
Mm.
always do. And I wish that we could learn how to control
Mm.
that. But as far as art, I'm really excited to see what artists can do. And I think it's just a new technology.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
going to have fun with it and probably teach you something about it.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I feel
So,
like artists always push the limitation,
yeah,
whatever they have meant for it to be used for,
yeah,
we can find a way to,
yeah,
like take it outside the box.
yeah.
You know?
I heard this panel discussion of artists that all use AI, and one of them was so interesting to me. She creates a painting
Yeah.
and then she puts it in AI and she tells it to abstract it. And then it comes
Oh,
back out.
interesting.
She paints that, she puts that back in AI and abstracts it. And she got to like 8 versions of
Yeah.
asking it, and it was getting way distorted. But the 8th version, it started going back to reality, which is so
Interesting.
interesting to me. It kind of
Yeah.
couldn't go too far with that. It started thinking reality was abstraction, which is so
Wow.
interesting in itself,
Yeah.
because it's like, are we real?
I'm so confused. What's
Yeah.
happening?
I mean, she confused the AI. She broke it.
Oh my goodness. Well, do you have any shows or events that you have out right now or exhibits?
Well, not right now. I had a big year last year and the year before, and
Yeah.
just showed in January. And tomorrow I'm doing the project I was telling you about with Momentum. I'm really
Yeah.
excited about with these executive leaders who have graduated the program, and we're going to do a weaving project together. So I've
Oh,
asked them all to
yeah.
bring, some pieces of clothing that are meaningful to them that we can weave. So we'll make a panel with that, and they'll have it in the Momentum offices here in Birmingham.
Oh, wow.
But and then Heather and I are going to show sometime this summer at a gallery in Worcester, Massachusetts. A friend of ours
Okay.
from school, two people from that graduated out, Lesley, a little ahead of me, have this gallery. And so we're talking about, we're in the stages right now. She's just had to have surgery, so a little behind, but we need to have a powwow about
Yeah.
how we're going to approach that show and everything. But we're real excited. She's a fiber artist and just
Mm.
incredibly beautiful, complicated work. And I don't really call myself a fiber artist because I'm kind of everything. But we're going to figure out a way to respond to each other and with it.
Yeah, that is going to be amazing. That's
Yeah, I mean,
exciting.
she's amazing. She's so much fun to work with, and I've learned so much from Heather. One of the things she kept telling me through school is, "You got this. You got this." And so I've like paid that forward so many times. But anyway, she's great. I'm excited to be showing with her. And my plan is this year, I want to there's a lot that I want to be learning and developing really with the weaving. And
Mm.
so I decided that my goal for this year is to create a show without a space. So I'd like to finish this year with a fully developed show
Yeah.
that has not been installed. And then I'm hoping to find a space in Birmingham and Mobile. I'd like to really,
Okay.
try it there first and see how it goes. So that's my goal.
Wow, that is quite the goal.
We'll see. It's a good way to I'm kind of a deadline junkie. And if I
Yeah.
don't have a deadline, I just spiral out into space.
Yeah.
And so I think, it's kind of a self-imposed deadline. And I've applied to a few things, so we'll see what comes up with that.
Well, what is some advice that you would give a younger artist that's starting out?
Interesting. Well, I'll tell you what
It's a
I
big
just
question.
yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what I told the students yesterday who were not art students. They were,
Yeah.
but I told them, I said, just be a lifelong learner. Just
Mm.
don't stop learning. Continue to dig.
Yeah.
Continue to reinvent yourself. You'll never be bored. There's no deadline here. On
Mm.
learning. Just keep going and never lose that curiosity.
Mm.
But I think opposite of that, I think I tend to pile too much on. I tend
Mm.
to get, okay, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that, and then and I'll have them all sitting in front of me, and I never finish any of it.
Yeah.
And I just go down these rabbit holes and go down these tracks, and I kind of layer too much on, and
Mm.
I'm really to a fault. And so I'm really, and this may be the wisdom of a 60-year-old woman, but I'm really trying to narrow in on what, I really want to do and try and, just focus on like weaving for right now and sewing, But it's so funny because I really, really appreciate, a painter who's been working the same way for 30 years or a
Yeah.
weaver who's been doing that. The patina that they have on their new work because of all of that knowledge and
Yeah.
repetition for years and years, it's a beautiful thing. And, I worry that I'm going in so many different directions and always trying something new that I'm going to lose that patina. And I really want to just dive head on into,
Yeah.
what I'm doing right now with the weaving and the making soft sculptures and stuff like that.
I feel like you're giving me advice because I do the same thing. I'm like, I was literally just before we got on the interview, I was thinking about that. I was like, I've got too many things
Yeah.
that I'm interested in. And then I go down that rabbit hole of exploring the thing, and
Yeah.
then nothing's getting done really. It's
Right.
all sitting around.
And then you find that other thing you were thinking about that you completely forgot
Yeah.
you did that. You're like, where did this come from? I know it's, these phones are so great in so many ways, but everything's available to us.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm constantly like, have a question, Google it, or ask Claude, but I mean, different ways that artists do things is just right in the palm of our hands, and we can
I
just go look it up.
know.
And so then I get tantalized by
I
that, and
me
trying to do this thing where I'm just like, nope, I don't need that. I can maybe do that later, but right now, this is where I am, and I
Yeah.
want to stay, for a few years at least, and develop work because then I've gotten this cycle where I wasn't developing work, because I was
Mm.
going in all these directions, and so really trying to quiet down and simplify my life too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I that is awesome advice. Absolutely. I've come across a lot of artists that it's a common thing, I think, to have, especially if you're sort of multimedia or mixed media, you can really get you're in this box over here, but you're in this box over here. You're
Yeah,
like, then you
yeah,
start mixing boxes and
yeah.
you're like, "Oh, where am I going with this?"
Yeah, I know. I mean, it just, and just, you can see these piles behind me
Yeah.
because they're all like, oh, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this. And then, so I pulled it with this workshop I've been doing, I pulled everything out. I was like, I'm dealing with all this now. I am going to just I'm just taking the idea that I'm not, I was treating everything too
Yeah.
preciously, treating it like, oh, I got to do something great with this. I'm not
Yeah.
going to do this till I have time to do it great, and
Yeah.
I just wasn't doing anything. And, I'm learning a lot of things, but not moving forward. So that's what I'm trying to do. Just kind of zeroing in
Well, I
on,
love what you've been doing
well,
so
thank
far.
you. Thank you. I
And I'm
appreciate that.
excited for this collaboration with Heather. Sounds
Oh, yeah.
amazing.
Me
That's
too.
so exciting. I wish
So,
it were here though. You guys got to
yeah,
come bring it back
we,
here.
we might need to do that. She's so fun because she's a girlfriend, she's a friend, and she's
Yeah.
an art friend, and she's a mentor, and hope I mentor her as well. We kind of pull each other off the ledge
Yeah.
a lot. And I mean, I have so many wonderful dear friends. Actually, I was interviewed for an online publication years ago, and she asked me what advice would I give my younger self, and I said, find funny friends. You will be endlessly happy. Funny girlfriends, you will be
Yeah.
happy. I have these wonderful girlfriends who are art appreciators. And actually, there's one of them who's just intensely talented. She just can just make anything cool. And I have another one who's just an interiors person that's just so talented. So they're all talented in different ways.
Yeah.
But Heather is we like are very, our inner art person is shared with each other. So
Yeah.
anyway, she's
That's
great.
why I think it's going to be amazing to do
Yeah.
something together. It's going to be really cool.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's going to be extra special. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for talking to me today. It's been
I,
so wonderful to like kind of pick your brain and see why and what and
yeah, well, I've
ask
heard your
questions.
podcast, and so I'm just so honored that you asked me, and I've just really enjoyed this.
Thank you for listening to Art Talk with April. New episodes are out Tuesday at 6 p.m.